The New York Giants are loaded with young talent from 3 straight excellent drafts, and they've brought in a Super Bowl winning head coach to tie everything together. Can Jaxson Dart, Cam Scadabo, and Abdul Carter get New York back to the promised land? Find out on the Grey Duck NFL Show. Welcome to the Grey Duck NFL Show, Team Preview Edition. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, and today we're continuing our series of dedicated half-hour deep dives on every franchise in the NFL. Today, it's the New York Giants. Throughout the show, we'll be breaking down the Giants roster, the scheme, their key questions, the predictions, and what it will take for them to succeed in 2026. This is your complete New York Giants preview. Let's get into it. Thanks for joining us here on the Grey Duck NFL Show. Give us a follow on Grey Duck Sports on both Twitter and YouTube, as well as grey.duck.sports over on TikTok to find all 32 of our team preview shows released all throughout the month of August and into September, leading up to NFL kickoff on Wednesday, September 5th between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. Well, talking about the New York Giants, what happened in 2025? A long time ago, this Giants team began its season with Russell Wilson as its starting quarterback. And things didn't go too terribly. I mean, they lost their first couple of games, with Russell Wilson, though, having a big game against the Dallas Cowboys and what ended up being an overtime thriller that Dallas ultimately won, but it looked like for a second maybe Russell Wilson had recaptured some of his old magic. That ended up not being the case. Jaxson Dart took over as the starting quarterback in Week 4. He was their first-round rookie. They traded back up into the first round to grab. They picked up wins over playoff teams like both the Chargers and the Eagles, with Jaxson Dart leading the charge, and it looked like things were finally starting to trend upward for New York, and maybe they could make a run at the playoffs. They had a big lead over the Denver Broncos, 19-0 in the fourth quarter. They give up 33 fourth quarter points, a embarrassing collapse, and end up losing that game 33-32. And that was the start of the end for the 2025 New York Giants. It was the first of 9 straight losses. Head coach Brian Daboll was fired after Week 10. And to make matters worse, the Giants won their last 2 games of the season and missed out on the top pick in the draft that they probably could have had a team sell the farm for in order to acquire Fernando Mendoza, since New York already had its franchise quarterback in Jaxson Dart. Well, what have they lost since then? Brian Daboll, obviously, out the door. Gone with him are his offensive coordinator and the interim head coach for the last part of the 2025 season, Mike Kafka. Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator, is also out. Bobby Okereke, linebacker that has been so pivotal to a Giants defense that hasn't always been at its best, but Okereke has always been there. He has been cut. Safety Dane Belton, who had kind of a breakout year, became a free agent. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles is out, as is Rakeem Nunez-Roches. Daniel Bellinger, the tight end, also elects free agency, and one of the bigger losses on the offense, wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. He ends up going to Tennessee, which is where, just so happens, Brian Daboll took over as the offensive coordinator of. So Daboll gets one of his favorite weapons to the detriment of the New York Giants offense. They also lose Cordell Flott into free agency, and quarterback Russell Wilson ended up retiring. Along with those, they go into the final week before the NFL draft with Dexter Lawrence demanding a trade, and he is ultimately traded. That is obviously the biggest name gone from this team last year. Dexter Lawrence, who had been so pivotal up the middle for New York over the past 6-7 years as both a run stopper and a pass rusher. He got off to a great start in 2024 before an injury ended his season. Didn't have the best 2025 campaign, but He wants out. He wants a contract raise. The Giants, unable or unwilling to give it to him, they trade him for the 10th overall pick to the Cincinnati Bengals. And we'll talk about what they did with that 10th overall pick, but no more Dexter Lawrence manning the middle. That could be a big loss for this New York Giants defense. Well, what have they gained? They bring in John Harbaugh, Super Bowl winning head coach from the Baltimore Ravens. He had spent the last 2008 until 2025, almost 18 years with Baltimore. They won the Super Bowl during the 2012 season with Joe Flacco running things as the quarterback. He now immediately takes over after being fired by the Ravens. He takes over as the head coach of the New York Giants, wastes no time getting that job, and he brings with him, he originally wanted to bring Todd Monken with him before Todd Monken got the job as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, so instead he settles for former offensive coordinator of the Chiefs and former Bears head coach Matt Nagy as his offensive coordinator. And for the defensive coordinator, the New York Giants bring in Denard Wilson. Some other additions to this roster include cornerback Greg Newsome, who split last year between both the Jaguars and the Cleveland Browns, having spent most of his career as a member of the Cleveland Browns until being traded last year. They also bring in a favorite weapon of John Harbaugh's in Baltimore, the tight end Isaiah Likely. The safety Ardarius Washington also coming aboard, and a staple of Baltimore, Patrick Ricard, the fullback, joins the fray. Tremaine Edmonds is a big upgrade at the linebacker position. He comes in. A guy that I like is wide receiver Calvin Austin III. I think he can do some sneaky stuff with the New York Giants offense, as can Darnell Mooney, who has had ups and downs throughout the course of his career, which has crossed paths with both the Chicago Bears and the Atlanta Falcons, and now takes him to the Meadowlands to join the New York Giants. Lucas Patrick, Daniel Falalele, defensive tackle veteran Shelby Harris, who is always good against the run, defensive tackle Zach Pickens, as well as Leki Fotu. Dominic Zavada, a kicker, is brought in, and basically they swap defensive tackles effectively with the Cincinnati Bengals by bringing in DJ Reader to try and give them some good run defense up the middle. And that's not all. They bring in, towards the beginning of minicamp, they bring in a trio of veteran wide receivers, Braxton Berrios, Juju Smith-Schuster, and yes, Odell Beckham Jr. is back with the New York Giants. At least for training camp, we'll see if he ends up making the team. As far as the draft goes for New York, they solidify their defense by bringing in potentially the best player. I had him as my second best player in the entire NFL draft, Arvell Reese, with their first of 2 first-round picks, as you might remember, as we just said. Dexter Lawrence netting a first-round pick from the Cincinnati Bengals, but with the Giants' own pick, they get Arvell Reese. They say that they are going to play him as an off-ball linebacker. I'm excited to see what sort of packages Arvell Reese can work into, because he was excellent against the run, and as long as he wasn't biting on play action when he was in straight man-to-man coverage or zone coverage, he could pull run, he could run with a running back out of the backfield on a wheel route. He played in a lot of different versatile areas. A lot of teams and draft experts kind of penciled him in as a potential edge rusher instead of a linebacker because of all of his athleticism, but the Giants already have a lot of edge rushers, a stable full of them, with Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns and Abdul Carter, who they selected with the 3rd pick last year. Arvell Reese gets to be an embarrassment of riches of young talent on that Giants front 7. Then with their 2nd first-round pick, number 10 overall, they go and get Miami offensive tackle Francis Mauigoa. Now, he will play guard, which is a position. I liked him as a tackle. I love him as a guard. So bringing Mauigoa there should shore up any holes that the Giants might have on their offensive line, and it certainly gives them a people mover that also can do a good job in pass protection. With their 3rd pick of the draft, they go and get cornerback Colton Hood, a man corner from Tennessee who had his ups and downs, can be a bit physical at times. With the 4th pick, it's wide receiver Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, a guy that struggled to get open but had some of the best hands in the draft and some of the best contested catch ability in the draft. Sometimes that translates to the NFL level. Sometimes you end up with a Keon Coleman. And the Giants also select defensive tackle Bobby Jamison Travis, offensive tackle J.C. Davis, and linebacker Jack Kelly. Those are the additions both via free agency, via trades, and via the 2026 NFL Draft. So that leads us to talk about what this offense for the New York Giants is going to want to do in 2026. And let's talk about that for a second, because subject of much controversy, Matt Nagy coming over to now call plays for the New York Giants. And we have seen Matt Nagy as a play caller for a while now. He's been a Super Bowl winning play caller with Kansas City and with Patrick Mahomes. He's also had some rough times as the head coach of the Chicago Bears when he was calling plays. And for Matt Nagy, I am not super confident that he is going to be the guy to get Jaxson Dart to the next level. And we can talk about that a little bit more later on in the show. But the Kansas City Chiefs offense over the Nagy tenure, to put it mildly, was boring. And it seemed like all of the life had been sucked out of a Kansas City Chiefs offense that had been so explosive through the first few seasons of Patrick Mahomes' Chief tenure, and into 2023, 2024, and especially 2025, it looked kind of stale. And I don't know how much you attribute that to Andy Reid and how much you attribute that to Matt Nagy, but the Chiefs kind of seemed to blame it on Matt Nagy because they bring their old offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy back and send Matt Nagy off to wherever he wanted to go. They put in a good word for him in Tennessee as he tried to interview for the head coach there. When he didn't get that job, he comes and joins John Harbaugh's staff with the New York Giants. And maybe the only reason he gets that job is because Todd Monken got offered a job as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns and took that job. Or else maybe Matt Nagy is left without a partner at the dance in the 2026 season. So what is it that Matt Nagy does? Well, he likes to run the inside zone a lot, or at least he has in recent years. Now, that could be a product of the players that he had running the football for him in Kansas City, Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, not necessarily the fleetest of foot, able to cut and find holes on the outside like you'd get in outside zone. You just want to get those guys moving north to south, and that's what the inside zone scheme can do. But the offense for Kansas City last year lacked a lot of explosives, especially in that run game. Now, Cam Skattebo is going to fit the mold probably for this a little bit better than Tyrone Tracy, because Skattebo is in the same sort of mold as Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, somebody that is able to just burst through against tacklers and doesn't have to make you miss, although Skattebo's got some sneaky fast feet as well. But I'm not sure Tyrone Tracy, who's more of an outside zone guy, who is more of an east to west runner, is going to be the best fit for the inside zone scheme that Matt Nagy employs. Matt Nagy also used play action at the lowest rate in the NFL last year, which for me is a negative. The play action pass off of the run is becoming more and more important once again in the NFL. I don't know if its importance has ever gone away all that much, but it seems to be even more significant recently, especially with the 12-13 tight end sets. When you have the ability to run the ball, it sets up that play action really well, even if it's not always a deep shot on the play action. Sometimes the underneath opens up. Sometimes it's just to get those linebackers moving up a hair so that you have the second level, the intermediate window, open for you. It's not always about going play action to take deep shots. It's going play action to create movement and open space for your receivers. And Matt Nagy used play action at the lowest rate in the NFL last year. Nagy's system was also predictable to a T. His run rates on second and long and second and medium were both very, very low. He played basically by the book. When you get into second and long, when you get into second and medium, teams start to play more too high coverage against you, because the tendency league-wide for offensive coordinators is to pass in those situations, and Matt Nagy played into that almost every single time. Didn't throw a whole lot of change-ups by going with the run game and trying to establish the run a little bit more. If the first run on first down was not successful, or it was an incompletion on a pass on first down, they were going to go to the air no matter what. Giants last year were at their best when running 12 personnel. Nagy used a little bit of 12 personnel to his credit, but again, 12 personnel is most effective when you can have a play action off of it. And again, Matt Nagy used play action at the lowest rate in the NFL last year. And Matt Nagy also employs a screen-heavy offense. So that's what the offensive scheme looks like. Do the Giants have the players to execute it? Well, let's talk about the quarterback. Jaxson Dart is entering his second season. He had some really good highs throughout the year last year, especially early on. But he also had some notably bad games, especially against the Vikings. And as the season wore on, teams were a little bit more attuned to what it was that Jaxson Dart did well, and I think we're able to contain him a lot more. He struggles against pressure, and he also struggles when using play action. He is a run threat. Obviously, we've seen him as a big body athlete, but that has also led to the injury scare. Multiple times he was evaluated for concussions throughout the last season, to the point where it became kind of a spectacle each and every game. At one time where Brian Daboll goes in and derides the independent concussion evaluator to try and get Jaxson Dart back into the game when he had seen enough of Russell Wilson after Dart had to be checked out for a concussion. Dart ended up going back into the game. There was a brief investigation into that by the NFL, but that is something that comes with the territory of a big physical running quarterback. Because his ability, and you don't want to take that away from him, because his ability to run the football makes the offense that more dynamic. You can use read options. You can go with quarterback counters or quarterback draw trap plays. There's a lot of different options that you can have. And of course, as always, the tush push in those third and short, fourth and short situations. Jaxson Dart cannot just give up that running ability, but it has to be a little bit more cautious, I think, in 2026. You have to dial it back a little bit to avoid the injury scares and the concussion scares that we had last season. He's got a strong arm. He's mostly accurate. I think he struggles to get off of his, or when he the first read isn't there for him, and struggles to see the whole field, but he's going to have to take a step forward for this offense. I'm not sure that Jaxson Dart is the guy to do that. But at the same time, the dynamic ability to run the ball might fill in some of the holes in his game as a passer. Now to the running back position. It's going to be a timeshare with Cam Skattebo and Tyrone Tracy. They are a solid 1-2 punch. They both last year had positive run yards over expected rate, with Skattebo getting it done with power and Tracy using his speed and his elusiveness. And then you add Patrick Ricard in a number of different formations when you want to go heavy. He is a player that at fullback is 300 plus pounds and can just absolutely pave the way for you to get open. He paved a lot of holes for Derrick Henry, and he's going to do the same for Cam Skattebo and for Tyrone Tracy. So I like the 1-2 punch that is employed there. The earth, wind, and fire that lived in 2008 in New York Giants lore might be making a comeback with at least the earth and wind portion of it in Skattebo and Tyrone Tracy. The wide receiver room is going to be a huge question mark for the 2026 season. Malik Neighbors had an injury at the end of last year, or at the beginning of last year, that kept him out for the rest of the 2025 season, for most of the 2025 season, and that injury has not improved enough to the point where he is seeing significant time on the field at training camp. It's still lingering, and the depth behind him is a little bit shaky. We talked about Malachi Fields. He's a player that is good with contested catches, but that doesn't always translate if you don't have another part of your game that you are a master at. And Malachi Fields struggles to get open on a consistent basis because he's a bit slower, he's a bit less quick, and relies more on just his body control and ability to out-jump and out-size defensive backs that he is going up against. And again, sometimes that works. Sometimes you're Mike Evans. A lot of the time you turn out to be Keon Coleman. Darius Slayton has been underwhelming. Basically every single season, I feel like I'm always expecting a bigger year from him, and the Giants either refuse to use him in a ton of routes, or just he's not getting open and not getting targeted. So his numbers are always pretty pedestrian. Maybe this year is the year he breaks out. I'm starting to have less hope in that year by year. Darnell Mooney and Calvin Austin III are similar sorts of players, but I like both of them in the roles that they can play on this offense. If you're going with 11 or 12 personnel, both of those guys are quick and jitterbuggy, as Darnell Mooney and Calvin Austin can both twitch off the line of scrimmage and burn man coverage in the slot pretty easily. And then, of course, you get Juju, you get Odell, you get Berrios, you get Isaiah Hodgins. All of those guys are on the downward arc of their career. And really, the worst out of those options in terms of just pure wide receiver is probably Braxton Berrios. But he has probably the best chance to make the team because of his special teams versatility. Odell Beckham Jr., as great of a story it would be to welcome him back to MetLife Stadium, I am not sure I see him even making the roster, although the Malik Neighbors injury certainly even puts that up in the air as a question as well. At the tight end position, signing Isaiah Likely can create a ton of mismatches. He's not a great run blocker, but he can be an effective run blocker. And then obviously he has the athleticism to be a top-tier tight end receiver. He was always behind Mark Andrews in the depth chart in Baltimore, but now he's going to be the number one guy, and that mismatch ability is what has made 12 personnel and 13 personnel so successful, and it was why versatile tight ends are the major X factor on offenses, and adversely, big nickels that are excellent, or whatever skill level your big nickel is, can oftentimes be an indicator of your entire team defense, because that is the X factor on the defensive side. Isaiah Likely and Theo Johnson can both be guys that create a numbers advantage for New York and kind of force you to pick the lesser of two evils. Do you want to bring in your heavy personnel and risk getting burned on a deep explosive to Isaiah Likely, or do you want to bring in lighter personnel groupings and just get plowed over by the offensive line that includes Theo Johnson and Isaiah Likely? So that is a position of strength for New York. Meanwhile, the offensive line struggled against the blitz and with passing just in general last year. Most players are back. Andrew Thomas is a good player to have on that line, but the big improvement is Francis Mauigoa, who came over from Miami. He was the only really hole in his game was sometimes his ability to widen out against quick edge rushers and beat them to the point of attack. He could be beat with some speed. You don't have to worry about that as much on the interior. Now for the defense, what is it that Denard Wilson wants to do? Well, Denard Wilson doesn't blitz a ton. He comes over from Tennessee, and the Titans were near the top of the league for stunts last season. So just because they didn't blitz and they were typically only sending 4 players didn't mean that they weren't doing anything funky in the defensive line. They were. So we might see that Brian Burns Abdul Carter twist that was effective a lot last year in third down situations and really any passing situations. They would use Abdul Carter to set a pick and then get Brian Burns a free lane to the opposing rusher. That was effective. We're probably going to see a lot more of that in Denard Wilson's defense, and it is something that is hard to stop. Wilson runs a lot of cover 2 most of the time. He wants to cap the explosives. That will be easier if the Giants can have success against the run. If you can play in a 2-high shell, have success against the run, the explosive, being able to stop explosives, means you don't have to worry about the underneath routes. If you are in 3rd and long and 2nd and long situations, the underneath routes are not going to be as deadly as they are when you have to cover the whole field on 3rd and 4, for instance. So if the Giants can have success against the run, everything kind of hinges on that in order for this defense to be successful. And last year, unfortunately, they were dead last in EPA per rush allowed. I am interested to see they've gotten rid of a lot of those defensive tackles from last year, brought in DJ Reader as a big run-stuffing nose tackle up the middle. So I'm going to be interested to see how the puzzle pieces fit for a defense that doesn't blitz much, but has 2 excellent blitzing linebackers with both Abdul Carter and with Arvell Reese, as we mentioned. So do they have the players to execute their scheme? The Giants, completely revamped their defensive line. Like I said, it was the worst against contact last season. So there is a stat that NFL Pro Next Gen tracks, which is what is the yards before contact of a running back. And typically that is the push. Also, it has to do with the vision of the running back, because even if the offensive line gets a push, but the running back doesn't find the right hole, he still might get contacted behind the line of scrimmage. But a lot of times it is seen as an offensive line stat, where if the running back is getting 3 yards before he's even contacted, well, that tells you that the offensive line is getting a good push. Unfortunately, the Giants had the lowest yards before contact in the league defensively last year. Or I guess the highest, to look at it from the defensive side. So other offensive lines were getting a significant push against them. DJ Readers, bringing him in, he's a space eater. Shelby Harris is excellent at holding his outside edge as well and just stacking and shedding. So those are big upgrades to try and get this team to be a much better run stopping team than it was last year. Also, Darius Alexander from Toledo, he's going to have one more shot to show that he can be effective against the run, and they also have some depth with Leki Fotu. The edge rush situation is strong. I'm expecting another solid season from there. Brian Burns, immensely skilled both technically and athletically. Abdul Carter had a strong rookie season in terms of his pressure rate, wasn't always able to finish it off, but he should be a force in his second season. Kayvon Thibodeau rotating in and then also being on the field with their NASCAR package strengthens the depth. The NASCAR package is when you have more edge rushers even on the interior parts of your defensive line in passing situations or passing downs. So having Kayvon Thibodeau coming in as a third edge rusher along with Arvell Reese on the field at all times is going to be fun, but there's not much else behind that, however, in terms of depth. So if those guys get injured, you're dealing with some thinner edge depth than you would like. For the linebacker position, they bring in from the Chicago Bears Tremaine Edmunds. And the Bears last season were good against the run despite getting pushed off the line of scrimmage more than any other team in the NFL except the Giants. So that means that their second-level tacklers were making big plays because the Bears were still able to have a good defense against the run despite getting pushed back. That means those linebackers were getting in, making tackles cleanly, and not allowing explosives. New York brings in one of those second-level players with Tremaine Edmunds, who struggles a bit in coverage, but is great downhill, great against the run. And Arvell Reese has similar strengths at Ohio State and should be an incredible blitzer. And I think he is a much better pass coverage defender than Tremaine Edmunds, even if he sometimes bites on the play action. When he is not biting on the play action, like I said, he is able to run in coverage, whether it's a zone or a man-to-man matchup against a running back or tight end. I have trust that Arvell Reese is going to be able to handle that magnificently. Over to the cornerback position, every player in the defensive secondary underperformed last year. Paulson Adebo and Drew Phillips, namely Javon Holland also. But now Adebo and Phillips on the outside in a cover 2 are going to have less deep responsibility if they stick with that Denard Wilson defense. And that also means that they might not have to match as much. It's going to mean less miscommunication between them and the safeties. That should only help out those guys as they play the flats in the cover 2. And Greg Newsome, the second, also a good young addition that had some issues last year. And they also have the depth with Colton Hood, Corey Black, and Deontay Banks, who has been a bust at this point of his career. If he makes the roster, he is nothing more than a depth piece. Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin will be working together in the defensive backfield for a second year in a row. They were both bottom third in the league against deep passes last year, albeit in a quarter system that holds outside cornerbacks equally responsible for the deep parts of the field. Playing cover 2 doesn't allow Tyler Nubin, though, to play to his best strengths as an in-the-box safety. It's going to force him to play more of a free safety position covering a deep half of the field, so he doesn't get to be used in the box just as much, which can hurt the versatility of the Giants' defensive personnel. Let's look at the schedule for the Giants. The season is going to start with back-to-back primetime games, Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys, Monday Night Football against the Rams. Brian Dable comes back to town on September 27th with the Tennessee Titans. That will begin a string of 4 straight games against teams with losing records from last year. They have a Thursday night football game against the Commanders on November 12th, a Monday night football game against the Lions on December 28th, and the season ends with back-to-back divisional games against the Cowboys and the Eagles. The big part for me for this Giants team to have success, they need to do well in that 4-game stretch early in the season when they are going up against teams that had losing records from last year, all back-to-back to back-to-back. If they can have success in those games, then they are putting themselves in a good position for the rest of the season. If not, it's going to be a hole to climb out of, with the schedule only getting more difficult. Here are my 3 questions for the New York Giants as we head into the 2026 season. First is, when will Malik Nabers be back? And kind of an addendum with that, how effective will he be once he is back? I think this offense will go with Malik Nabers. It will go as far as Malik Nabers can take them. Malik Nabers, when he has been healthy, has been a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. Is that going to be the case coming off of a major knee injury that still hasn't really fully healed? Will he have that same sort of explosiveness? That is one of the questions that we have for the Giants in 2026. Next is, how will Jaxson Dart develop under Matt Nagy? I don't know how much confidence I have, because Jaxson Dart is not in the same vein as the players that Matt Nagy has developed. Alex Smith in his late career, Mitch Trubisky with Chicago. If you are going to develop him with the same Dart with the same sort of roadmap as Alex Smith and Mitch Trubisky in mind, I think you are going to be highlighting the weaknesses of his game and putting those on bigger display and hiding the best parts of his game. So I'm not exactly sure how that marriage works between Jaxson Dart and Matt Nagy. And then third, is the sky the limit for this group of edge rushers? Last year we talked about this potentially being an historic edge rusher group. It didn't end up living up to those expectations, and now you don't have Dexter Lawrence eating up double teams up the middle. So can Abdul-Carter, Arvell Reese, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, can all of those guys help New York take the next step on defense and really make that Denard Wilson scheme go? This New York Giants team is going to make the playoffs if Brian Burns and Abdul-Carter's dynamic duo on the edge develops further in 2026. If they can stop the run with their new look defensive line and their 2 new linebackers up the middle. They'll make it if Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland shake off their woes from their first season with New York last year, and if Jaxson Dart can rein in his game and stay healthy while also still highlighting his ability to run the ball, and if Malik Nabers is healthy and ready to go early in the season and is at the same level that he always has been at when he has been healthy. This Giants team will be making a top 5 pick if DJ Reader and Shelby Harris really begin to show their age. They've always been good against the run up to this point in their career, but we know once age hits, that's a big falling off point. Once you start to go down the slope, it goes pretty quick. So is that the year? Do both DJ Reader and Shelby Harris hit the wall? If that's the case, I think that this is a pretty bad defense. I think a lot of their defense this year is going to be dependent upon how DJ Reader and Shelby Harris hold up against other teams' offensive lines against the run. Another way that they would also have a top 5 pick, Malik Nabers is hampered by a lingering injury all season, doesn't have that same explosiveness, and the Giants then lack a true number 1 receiver. Also, Jaxson Dart, using his running ability too much, gets him hurt multiple times as he puts his body on the line. Also, if Matt Nagy's offense looks like every Matt Nagy offense that we've seen in recent memory, that doesn't help this team's playoff chances. Let's go to our predictions before wrapping up our New York Giants preview. The over-under for the season, as we are recording this episode for New York, is 7.5 wins and losses. I am taking the under. I think there is too much up in the air right now. I don't like Matt Nagy's offense. I think the offense is going to take a step back. It doesn't play into Jaxson Dart's strength. And I have questions about whether Malik Nabers is going to be an explosive option, or you're just going to have a lot of shifty but basically slot-only receivers with Calvin Austin and Darnell Mooney, and then have maybe an old Juju Smith-Schuster or Odell Beckham Jr. on the outside. That is a concern, as is the age cliff that eventually one day is going to hit DJ Reader and Shelby Harris. The percentage that could be this year isn't like astronomical, but it's there. And if that happens, then I don't have faith in the cover 2 shell that Denard Wilson likes to use really being able to stop a whole lot of other teams' offense throughout the course of the 2026 season. So I am going on the under for the 7.5 games for the New York Giants in 2026. And that's what the Grey Duck has to say about your 2026 New York Giants. We've covered the roster construction, we've covered the coaching vision, the strengths of the team, the concerns, and the realistic outlook for the season ahead. If you liked this episode, then go ahead and give us a follow. Again, we are on YouTube at Grey Duck Sports, and we are over on Twitter at Grey Duck Sports, and on TikTok at grey.duck.sports. All of those places you can find our continued team preview series. Hit the follow button, as this is just one piece of our larger team preview edition. Over the next month, we are going to be going through every single team in the same way every single day. Tomorrow, we take a look at the 2026 Washington Commanders. We will see you then.